Good morning and welcome to the latest installment of the ABCs of Cumberland County History. My name is Joseph David Cress, History and Education Reporter for the Sentinel newspaper in Carlisle. Today the focus is on the letter P. P as in pranks, but also P as in Peck. Jesse Truesdale Peck, to be precise. In Cumberland County history, the words pranks and Peck are linked in many outrageous ways. Allow me to explain. Aside from being a journalist, I'm also an author. In 2012, the History Press published my book, Wicked Carlisle, The Dark Side of the Cumberland Valley. A nonfiction true crime book, it touched on the vile side of Carlisle, its criminal element, its villainy, through 13 chapters of trauma and temptation, trickery and tantrums, spanning almost 200 years. One chapter focused on the mischief makers and schemers of a certain local institution we look to for enlightenment, Dickinson College. On May 18th, 1848, Robert Emory died in Baltimore, Maryland. Jesse Truesdale Peck was chosen to replace him as Dickinson College president. The college at the time was affiliated with the Methodist faith. Peck had a fine record as a minister and head of 2 seminaries, but from the beginning, Dickinson students viewed him in contrast to Emory, who was beloved and admired by the campus community. Though educated, Peck was not a college man, so he lacked insight going into the office on September 18th, 1848. His appearance and personality made Peck an easy target for some of the nastiest student pranks ever perpetrated in Dickinson College history. Peck was described as a massive figure who strutted around campus with his huge belly out like a peacock's tail. Dignified in bearing, Peck had a strange habit of rolling his R's in conversation. But what got him in trouble the most was his attitude towards students. One of those who took aim at Peck was Moncure Conway, of the class of 1849, who, years after his legendary prank, wrote, "Our immature minds could not appreciate his good qualities, while his large paunch, fat face, baby-like baldness, and pompous air impressed the whole college as a caricature. He had been a school teacher and called us boys, and we felt like he was inclined to discipline us like boys." In his writing, Conway confessed to being the only culprit in a scheme that had Peck committed to an insane asylum on March 7, 1849. His motive for this prank was revenge, after his friend Henry Smith was brought before the faculty and punished for drinking and card playing. Though Smith was later returned to class after a plea from his mother and a pledge of good behavior, the whole incident, Conway wrote, stirred my dislike of Peck into wrath. As the story goes, Conway hatched a plot one evening as he was playing euchre with 2 friends. Their conversation turned to Peck's upcoming trip to Stoughton, Virginia, to give a report on Dickinson College before an annual regional conference of Methodist leaders. Peck had also made arrangements to witness the inauguration of President Zachary Taylor in Washington, D.C. It was in that trip that Conway saw an opportunity for payback. He knew that Stoughton was famous for its asylum, which had a physician named Stribling as its superintendent. Using a false name, Conway wrote Stribling a letter explaining how a harmless lunatic who imagined himself as the Dickinson College president had run away to Stoughton to make a report to the conference. In his letter, Conway described Peck in great detail and asked Stribling to please detain the poor soul until friends could come for him. Well, Peck arrived in Stoughton on the day expected. After stepping off the train, he was approached by a man seeking to confirm his identity. Peck confirmed that he was indeed Dickinson College president. At that point, the stranger invited Peck to step inside a waiting carriage. Peck complied believing the carriage ride to be a courtesy extended to guests at the conference. In the drive to the asylum, Peck continued to chat with his travel companion. Only later did Peck realize where he had been taken and demanded to be released. In response, Stribling kept trying to reassure Peck that he would not be harmed. Instead, the protest got so loud and insistent that Stribling sent for people at the conference to confirm the true identity of Peck. When the asylum finally released Peck, Stribling apologized for the misunderstanding. Peck's trip was ruined, and a subsequent investigation failed to identify Conway as the culprit. 9 months later, in December 1849, a conspiracy of students played another nasty prank on Peck. This time, the college president was locked inside a freight car overnight. At that time, the Cumberland Valley Railroad had a track running down the middle of West High Street in Carlisle. There was a siding along the front of the campus. Boxcars parked there were often broken into by students who stole food. One night, Peck could hear students whispering out just outside his office about a plot to pilfer some oysters from a boxcar. The students hurried off, opened the side door, dug under the car to await the arrival of Peck. Sure enough, the president appeared and called out to the students, who made noises as though they were inside the boxcar. Peck climbed inside, only to have the door closed and locked behind him. At that point, the students pushed the car over the grade at West Street, and the car coasted by gravity down to the bridge over the Latour Creek. Peck was confined for hours before anyone investigated the contents of the boxcar. Not only was Peck unpopular with students, he lacked fundraising ability at a time when the college really needed the money. Though Peck visited churches and camp meetings, he always came up short on donations. Enrollment decreased by nearly a third during his administration, from 158 students in the 1847-48 academic year to 107 students when Peck left in July 1852. In June 1851, Peck tendered his resignation, effective at the close of the 1851-52 year. He had this to say to the governing board, quote, "I have been for some time convinced my happiness and usefulness, and perhaps my health and life, would require me to change my field and kind of labor in as early a period of time as possible. I've determined to follow strictly the indication of Providence and seek rest from cares and labors to which I feel myself poorly adapted." Despite the resignation, the pranks continued up until the end. In May 1852, students set fire to the outhouse adjoining the president's house. The arson took place as Peck was writing his final commencement address. This brunt of jokes would have greater success later in life as a bishop of the Methodist Episcopal Church and one of the founders in 1870 of Syracuse University. Still, there was at least one other story that connected Peck to Dickinson College and the pranks committed by its students. Sometime during the 1860s, Peck was strolling on the deck of a Mississippi steamboat when he heard a familiar tolling. He investigated and found out that the signal was coming from the same bell that had gone missing from Old West, which at the time was the main administrative building on the Dickinson College campus. It is said that Peck had the captain return the bell, which the college must have fastened more securely, because only the clapper kept disappearing in the years that followed. This concludes my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be returning in September with another installment of the ABCs of Cumberland County history. Thank you and have a good day.